Welcome to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Kristin Scruggs. Kristin is a first-year student in our full-time MBA class of 2025, and she is also involved with leadership roles with Darden's tutoring program, as well as the Graduate Women in Business Student Organization Leadership Board. Kristin and I recently connected to talk more about her background, her decision to pursue an MBA, what led her to Darden, her experience as a first-year student, and so much more. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And as always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to the Experience Darden podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here is my interview with Kristin Scruggs. Kristin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to have you here. How's everything going?
Good. I'm doing great. Wish it was a little warmer here in Charlottesville, but honestly can't wait for spring to come in full swing.
I mean, a brief taste of spring this past weekend. It was warmer, the sun was shining, it felt so nice, and then cruel joke, rain, kind of cold. Like what?
I know.
I thought we're all ready. Yeah, it's not quite spring yet.
No, we know what we're missing out on, but it's coming.
All right. Well, quarter four. Busy quarter. What quarter? What classes are you taking in this quarter?
So we have two core classes this quarter, which is GEM and Ops, and then we get to do 3 electives. So I'm in a Advancing Creative Ideas elective, which I'm really enjoying. It's more of a leadership class focused on what constitutes an idea and how do you make an idea gain traction. And then I'm in 2 other electives that are a little more quant focused, valuations in financial markets and also data visualization and analytics. I really enjoy those classes. I do not come from a quant background at all, and so it's fun to challenge myself there.
All right. And for folks who are just kind of orienting towards the Darden curriculum, GEM is Global Economies and Markets. It's the economics class. And then Ops, of course, is operations. I think it's pretty straightforward, but there's a whole alphabet soup of acronyms that you have to know, I think, as you get started on this process.
There is. Even saying the full name of my electives threw me off because I'm so used to calling them by their shortened names. So yeah, it's a fun little language you get to learn here.
Well, Kristin, thanks for coming on the podcast. Tell us a little bit more about you. What's your story?
Yeah, well, I grew up just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah. Love Utah. I think it's such a phenomenal state. Has everything you could want in terms of all the outdoors things, which is what I love to do: hiking, walking, anything outside. And then I went to undergrad at BYU, Brigham Young University. I met my husband there, and after I graduated, we moved to Texas and moved around a lot for the first 3 years after we graduated. Before we spent about 3 years in Wichita. It was kind of one of the more long-term places we stayed, and that's where I graduated with my first master's in speech pathology. And I started working there at a trauma center in Wichita, so a big hospital that serviced rural Kansas and rural Oklahoma. And as a speech pathologist, your job is to see patients throughout the hospital and diagnose any problems they might have in, speaking impairments, perhaps after a stroke. But really what you work with mostly is swallowing impairments. So people who are in the hospital may be unable to safely eat or drink food because the muscles in their throat don't work properly, don't coordinate well together, and they aspirate what they eat. So it was my job to identify if this was happening and to stop it from happening because it can result in pneumonia and death. So that was my career for a while. I really enjoyed my job. About a year after I started working as a medical speech pathologist, COVID hit, and that was interesting times. Everything was unknown and everything was a little bit scary, but there was also a lot of unity during that time, especially among the medical community. And I volunteered at my hospital to see the COVID patients. So every day was gowning up to go into the ICU and to treat them and see how is COVID, affecting people's ability to eat. And it was interesting. And I think that the medical system really learned a lot of valuable lessons during that time. But then, our time in Wichita came to an end, and I moved to Houston with my husband. He actually went and got his MBA at Rice University, which is what took us to Houston. And then still just continued working as a speech pathologist and worked in a large hospital in Houston called Memorial Hermann. I really have a lot of love for that place. I learned and grew so much as a professional there. And, then I was kind of about 4 years into my career when I decided I wanted to go and pursue an MBA. And I say that there were like big picture items and small picture items that kind of pushed me to think about switching my career. And big picture, I really wanted to just improve the healthcare system. I think COVID exposed a lot of the inefficiencies and kind of the difficulties people see within healthcare. And I am the type of person that's always trying to improve everything I'm in. I want to make it better. I want to, fix all these problems. And I just kept hearing that, like, there's no way that's going to happen. This thing is too big and too massive for you to change it. And, so it was primarily that drive to be a part of the solution that had me seek something outside of speech pathology. But I think just like many people in business school, there were some small things that really every day kind of bothered me to transition careers. I really wanted a lot of more responsibility. I wanted more growth day to day, more variability within my career, not just seeing patients every day. So that's kind of, my journey from point A to where I'm at now at Darden, pursuing this MBA, and I've loved every moment of it.
Yeah, I'm sure many of our prospective student listeners can relate to what you're describing there as to why you decided to pursue an MBA. You wanted to sort of have more responsibility, kind of advance your career in ways. And that feels very, very real. I've heard that from more than one podcast guest, as you might imagine. So speech pathology is such an interesting career path and interesting work. What attracted you to that?
Yeah, I get this question a lot because it is interesting. It's very unique, and especially the road I took within speech pathology is quite unique as well. People hear it and they think speech impediments for young children, which is not what I did at all. I came from a very medical family. My dad was a doctor, and I come from a big family. I have 4 brothers-in-law, and they were all physicians. And so this was kind of what I knew. So I knew I wanted to be in the medical field, but I wasn't so sure about being a physician. And speech pathology it's a great career for many reasons. You can have exposure to medicine if you want, or, education systems. You can have the opportunity to work fewer days a week if you want, which is something I valued at the time. And so really it was this mix of wanting to be in medicine, but not as a physician, and then also wanting a lot of flexibility with my career at the time.
Very interesting. So how did you get interested in Darden?
So I was in Texas at the time, and there weren't a lot of schools that I was looking into outside of Texas. It wasn't really feasible for my partner to move with me. So I knew if I left Texas that I would be leaving him as well. And so Darden was pretty much the only school I looked at outside of Texas. And I'm not quite sure how it popped on my radar. I knew I wanted to do consulting, and Darden is a really good school for consulting. And I think that's primarily how it kind of came up. And then I also have a brother in Virginia, and we're really close, and I really wanted to be close to him. So I thought, hey, Darden's a fantastic school. I'm looking for a school that can really transition me from doing a big career transition into consulting. I think Darden would excel from that. And cherry on top, I get to be next to family for the first time in about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, I assume you did not have a lot of family in Wichita or in Houston, Texas.
No, all my family's in Utah. Have a couple of siblings that have moved around throughout the years, but apart from my brother, everybody's in Utah. So have been living apart from family for a while. But it's all good. You grow a family wherever you're at.
That's a great point. So Darden hits on your radar, and you end up here, brand new first year student. What was that adjustment like? You'd already done a master's degree, so grad school maybe not totally unfamiliar to you, but MBA program, case method, I'm sure all kinds of things that were new here at Darden. So what was the adjustment like as a first year student?
Yeah, I would say the biggest shock of Darden was just um, living apart from my partner. It was weird and different. And I also think it's something that, has kind of forced me to just jump head first into everything at Darden. I think when you first start, you're trying to grapple with not only the peculiar academic situation at Darden, the case method, which is, an interesting skill to develop, but you're also kind of grappling with your career options. Do I really want to do consulting? How much time am I going to spend on this? It completely consumes your life, and it can feel a little bit suffocating at times. But that being said, one of I mentioned choosing Darden for their, consulting, and it's a great reason. But really, what tipped the scales for Darden was the community, and that community has come through 100%. When you're in your first quarter and you're trying to figure out classes and you're trying to figure out how to navigate recruiting, the Darden community really steps up, and it comes to be a place where you can, find some of your best friends. You can be vulnerable around others. You're all going through it together. And I really think they do a good job of getting you through that first year and that first initial transition time.
Yeah, one of the hard things about that first semester is there's just so much happening all at the same time, right? You can't just say, "Oh, I'm just going to focus on school for right now." You really don't have that luxury because recruiting starts pretty soon. In fact, there's actually recruiting activities you can do before you come to school in the summer. You meet with firms, get to learn about some of these companies where you could work. So there's even pre-matriculation stuff that you can be engaged with. And then so you get here, you have school, you have career, and oh, by the way, you're in a new community. You want to meet people, you want to make some connections, make some friends. So you have the social piece too. And it's just a lot.
It is a lot. And I think it's something that every single student at Darden struggles with to balance. But I think it builds an important skill in sure resiliency, just going through something that's a little bit hard, but also in figuring out for yourself what's important to you. Um, for me, the first 2 semesters, uh, recruiting was really important, but also academics was very important because I didn't know any of this. I'll be honest, I hadn't taken a math class since high school. Don't know how I did that in college, but somehow I finagled my way out of, true math. And it was tough to kind of be back in this environment, but I knew if I wanted to walk away from my MBA with both the job I wanted, but also the skill I wanted to succeed in the job I was at, I needed to focus on academics. And so, I chose to prioritize academics and recruiting over the more social things. That being said, I did plenty of social stuff. I was doing things every weekend with friends and participating in all the Darden events. So it's not that you can't have, one of the three. It's just a delicate balance and being willing to flex and kind of move with the waves as they come.
Yeah, that point around prioritization is certainly something that comes up over and over again here on the podcast. The idea that you really need to know what your goals are and have a clear sense of that. And that can help you when you have to make some of these tough decisions around where do I put my time, where do I put my energy. We have a lot of things competing for both.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned you had not taken a math class in college, and well, you're going to have to take obviously math classes, so to speak. Darden, you're going to have accounting, finance. decision analysis. I mean, there's some math. What was that adjustment like to have these more quantitatively oriented courses?
I honestly think it's been awesome. I've loved using this aspect of my brain again. I think if for some reason I developed like a bit of a fear of math growing up in high school, and I'm not sure why that was there because I can do math. It's fine. I will say that I've worked really hard at it. Did a lot of hours studying for the GMAT and kind of rebuilding those base skills. Um, and then something that has been a pleasant surprise is, in my previous career, like getting my master's in speech pathology, there's a lot of stats, there's a lot of research, and so that has kind of come through with the decision analysis courses. And I found that I really enjoyed those courses a lot, and that's been a welcome relief when I kind of, come across regression, which is something I understand and can don't have as heavy of a lift on. But it's been really fun and I've enjoyed it. And Darden has some wonderful services for people who, don't have these really strong finance or quant heavy backgrounds. You can do tutoring, which I'm excited to be a part of next year. And the professors are incredibly helpful. They're there whenever you need it. And of course, I can't forget your learning team, which helps you through everything.
Well, I'm curious, Kristin, do you know what you'll be doing this summer?
Yeah, so this summer I've accepted an internship with Chartis. They're a consulting firm that focuses in healthcare, and within healthcare, they primarily focus with the provider services. So it'll, I was unsure if I wanted to focus on healthcare in my full-time role when I started at Darden. And throughout the recruiting process, I realized that I did, and that was where I wanted to go. So I'm really excited to kind of go back to healthcare and hopefully, help these hospital systems and improve and get better.
Well, this time of year is also a time of transition with the clubs and organizations, out student leaders outgoing, new student leaders coming in. Tell us about some of the leadership roles you'll be taking on here as you move into your second year.
Yeah, so um, I'll start off with in the first year, I had the opportunity to be a review coordinator for my section. So you help plan exam review sessions for the section, make sure that everybody's prepared for their finals. And that role kind of set me up to be one of the co-chairs for the tutoring program at Darden. So I'll be doing that next year, which I'm really excited about. I really enjoyed being review coordinator, and I'm excited to try to make the services more expansive to students in Darden. And then I will also be the VP of Academics in GWIB, the Graduate Women in Business Club. I think that'll be a lot of fun. It also kind of coincides well with the tutor chair role. And then I'm also a Forte Fellow as well. So excited to be, supporting the incoming first years as best I can on those fronts.
I'm curious about your thoughts about the tutoring program and this desire to make them more expansive. What does that mean?
I think that we would like to try to get more people involved in tutoring or to use the tutoring services. And so just making sure that first years know that this is an option for them, how they can utilize it, and to try to improve, accessibility to the tutoring program, offering perhaps virtual sessions if possible, things like that. It's definitely a work in progress, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention the current second years. Elias and Fiza have done so much kind of groundwork in making this program so much better than what it used to be. And so we're kind of trying to stand on the shoulders of them and just get it up another level. They've done a lot.
One of the things that I think is part of the journey for MBA students is learning how to ask for help. And high functioning, high performing people in academic settings may not have had to ask for help previously. You mentioned the learning team; it's a resource for you, but you also have this tutoring program in the full-time MBA program. Is it challenging for students to say, work with the tutors, this to identify that's something that they would benefit from? I imagine it could be.
Yeah, I this is interesting you bring that up because I actually was talking with a fellow first year student just this morning about this exact topic. And yeah, I do think people in any situation have a hard time saying, "Hey, I need help on this topic. Can you help me learn, finance?" Especially when sometimes in class it can feel like, um, did you all know this before we came in here? Because I didn't know it. And then after class you realize, no, they didn't know it. But um, that's also something, in this discussion I had with another first year was how can we kind of break down this stigma of it of, oh, I don't need tutoring or I don't go to tutoring, and instead, you know, transform the idea into tutoring is there to take you up to the next level. I'm sure everybody could use it in some form or fashion, and there's, you know, no reason why anybody should feel like they shouldn't take advantage of it.
I appreciate that point, and I really think it's important for our listeners to hear that there's not a stigma around this, that this is a resource that is there for students. Everybody needs a little help sometimes. This is not easy, what you're doing here at Darden, and no one has background in every single course you're going to take. I mean, think about the core curriculum, it's 10 different topics and all over the place, from
Mm-hmm.
accounting to operations to marketing to leadership communication. I mean, the list
Mm-hmm.
goes on. And asking for help, that is such an important skill for you to have as you move forward in your career, being able to see where your understanding is, where other people can be helpful to you. That is a really useful
Mm-hmm.
skill.
Yeah, and something I was really nervous about when I first came to Darden was my lack of background and experience in these things. And I quickly realized that something Darden excels at is creating a student body that is extremely diverse, in background and in thought. And I love this because I really did not feel that alone being a speech pathologist coming, from such a different background. I think that the, the variability in people's backgrounds is what makes the Darden experience unique. And it's what makes your case method classes so interesting and nuanced to hear from so many people who have such differing opinions and experiences. It really is a benefit. And the term like non-traditional student is interesting. And I definitely feel like I'm a non-traditional student, but I think everybody or many people can say that they're a non-traditional student in one sense or another.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things. So sometimes people will come on the podcast and say, well, my background, I'm what you would consider to be a non-traditional student. I think we've had pretty much all the people on the podcast pretty would be categorized as non-traditional in some way. That sort of binary has really broken down, particularly here at Darden, where you're right. We try to have as much as difference as possible in the classroom, really kind of build for those discussions that you're having, and the more difference in terms of perspectives and backgrounds, lived experience, work experience, the list goes on. The richer those conversations are. So what has GWIB meant to you, the Graduate Women in Business Student Organization? Kristin, what is that organization meant to you as you've navigated your first year here?
GWIB has been a big source of support for me. It's a place where I know I will always have a community of women to rely on should I need. Something I love about the GWIB Club is they match you with a GWIB mentor. And so not only at Darden will you have a second year coach who coaches you more in your career, but you also, if you're a female identifying student, have the opportunity to have a GWIB mentor. And I think that this is really unique because not only was my mentor helpful throughout my recruiting process, but in choosing which electives I want to take as a second year and in deciding, or things just like where are good restaurants to eat at in Charlottesville, and really being a friend. And so that's something that I've loved about GWIB, is just having a community of women to support you throughout this process. It's been really great.
Yeah, I love that point around everybody has questions. And they can be big questions like, hey, what's going on in this accounting case that we're talking about? Or just like, is there a grocery store you might recommend here for these kinds? I mean, it's new to everybody across a lot of different dimensions. And most of our students do not live in Charlottesville. They've all relocated to this area. And even if they went to UVA for undergrad, they're typically several years removed from that experience. So they may know a little bit about Charlottesville, but getting that advice from second year students, the people who've gone through this experience, to me, that second year to first year knowledge share and knowledge transfer is a big part of the Darden experience, and happens in so many ways, both formal and informal.
It really does. And that's something I've been focusing on lately as we transition the roles from the second years to the first years, is really trying to understand, what has their experience been like? What's worked and what hasn't? What can we improve? And, what do we need to change based on our class makeup and how we're different from them? It's been really interesting and resulted in a lot of interesting discussions, but, the students really do form the experience you have. They lead all the clubs, both academic and social. They plan all the events, and you realize just how important that relationship is. And it's definitely one of my goals next year, to be available to the first years and be a friend to the first years, and to give them a year to remember. Really, I think our second years did a fantastic job. They've been incredibly helpful and supportive, and I'm excited to continue on the traditions that they've set in place.
Well, are there other clubs and organizations that have been important to your Darden experience thus far you would want to talk about here?
Yeah, I would love to. I think, the Darden Outdoors Club has been one of my favorite. I grew up in Utah, so I mentioned previously how much I love the outdoors. And in Houston, this is something I missed a lot. So I was excited to come here and be a part of that. Favorite events there would be the rafting trip they do in September, is really fun. And then I also love the ski trip. This winter was actually in Utah, so that was lucky for me. And then another club that I think is phenomenal is the Improv Club. One of my close friends started it this year, and it's going to continue to be a club next year. It is such a fun club that I never thought I would be into, but I'm very into it. It's a great time to really decompress from class, to hang out with friends, and just do some fun improv games. And it just helps you think on your feet and be more creative, which is something that everybody could benefit from.
Well, I wonder, Kristin, are there things that you're looking forward to in the coming months? We talked a little bit about your internship, which I know likely big, and what you're looking forward to, but other things that you're looking forward to in the months ahead.
Top of mind is in May, I'll spend the month in Houston and be with my partner again. So I'm very excited about that, and excited to go and hang out with my Houston friends again. But really, I am so excited to jump into my internship and see what that will be like. I'll be in New York, which will be a fun transition for me. I'm excited for that experience, to live in the city, and really just kind of yearning to see what consulting really is like. It can be a bit of a mystery. You don't really know what it's like until you do it. And so I can't wait to jump in and hopefully just have a great summer.
I love that. The idea of like, you have this idea of consulting, but you kind of have to go and do it to kind of find out, is it really what you wanted to do or what you thought it was? The internship being an important part of that discovery process. So last question for you here, Kristin. What's a piece of advice, something you would encourage our prospective student listeners to think about as they go forward on their own MBA journeys?
I think just trust yourself. You've come this far, and your hard work has gotten you this far and will continue to get you the rest of the way. I think throughout this program, just it's important to be your genuine self and don't let the crowd push and pull you in a direction. Just know what you want and go and get it and enjoy the ride. It's a crazy one, but it's a really fun one and a very fulfilling one for sure.
Well, Kristin, thank you again for joining us here on the podcast. Congratulations on your exciting roles, the tutoring chair, the role on the GWIB board, and focused on academics, as well as your Forte Fellow ambassador role. Lots of exciting things. And by the way, your internship coming up in the next few months. Have a great time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited and appreciate it.
And that was my interview with Kristin Scruggs, a first-year student in our full-time MBA class of 2025. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Till next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.